Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Chicago Justice Show. I'm your host, Tracy Siska. I'm also the executive director of the Chicago Justice Project. You can find out more about what we do outside of the Chicago Justice Show at chicagojustice.org. Find out about our transparency work, our research work, and CJP Nation, which is a volunteer programming between volunteers and interns, where you can be a part of what we do. And we really appreciate the help. Okay, so today we're going to be talking about a bunch of topics. The CPD's proposed new foot pursuit policy that Lightfoot kind of just dropped today. The media stirring unrest. If you want to look at how and where the conspiracy theories that fueled the insurrection in in DC came from, you can find it in Conspiracy Theories Pushed in Chicago by the Fraternal Order of Police, and very similar ones about media conspiracies. We're also going to talk about the feds probing the redline shooting of all shootings. Illegal gun carrying up in Chicago and how it's not really up, but it's some kind of voodoo academics to prove a point. Not sure really what the point was. Gang members instructing their members to shoot police. We're going to check the no check in that article, a zero-sourced article. Zero. It's amazing. And we're going to talk about Chicago's spike in shootings, as if it's somehow independent of spikes in violence all over the country. Nothing new from the media that can't help but write those stories. But first, if you want to sponsor this show, we would love it. And actually, this goes Monday, Wednesday, Friday, 5:30 p.m. Central. We're going to be working in more guests in the upcoming future, including a couple aldermen. CPAC people are going to be on. The group that is merged with GAPA about the police commissions ordinance. They have now a new merged ordinance that they're releasing. We would love the sponsorship starting what it looks like next Wednesday on the 14th. We're going to be launching our town hall series, and the first one is on imagining a new paradigm about rape kit transparency. It's basically about how about what would it look like to design a survivor-centric, advocate-centric transparency system around rape kit collection, around rape kit processing by the police, the crime lab back to the police, and then if there are hits into the DNA, and whether or not there are prosecutions. What would that look like if we were to build it from scratch? So that's the first one. We have more coming up in the subsequent months. So we're going to go on to our first segment today about Mayor Lightfoot calling for the creation of a new foot pursuit policy and how she wants it created by the start of summer. And it's really kind of interesting that this hasn't come up previously in her administration. This has been something other cities have done. Foot pursuits are incredibly dangerous for residents of the city, even visitors, just plain civilians, and it's dangerous for officers. It gets them into very bad situations where bad outcomes are not infrequent. The reason I have a little bit of an issue with Lightfoot calling for it now is, this is all about Adam Toledo's shooting, a 13-year-old that died within the last week or so. Died in an officer-involved shooting. There's been all kinds of uproar about the shooting and whether it was justified. There really isn't any information to say it is unjustified at this time. However, there are obviously, as there always are in these situations, calls to release all the videotape. The CPD and the city put in a policy prior to Lightfoot's administration, during the Emanuel administration, that basically says they will work to release it in the first 60 days. Or that's when they're supposed to release, 60-day limit. So the fact that they're not releasing it the next day or something is not new. I don't know if it's in the best interest of everyone to release it that quickly. Yes, the body cam footage should be released. Originally, some of the uproar was about COPA, Citizen Office of Police Accountability, the office that is supposed to release the video, an investigative officer involved shootings, said they wouldn't release it because he's a minor. There was some uproar by transparency advocates like Matt Topic, one of the top lawyers on FOIA lawyers in the city from Lovie. And amidst the uproar, COPA reviewed their decision. They said that there's some state law that prohibits it. There really isn't. Now they have since reversed their decision. We've talked about this in a prior show. The mayor called for the release. The superintendent called for release. It's kind of a joke because the superintendent can release the video. They have it. They possess it. He can release it anytime he wants. He doesn't have to worry about that policy. It's absolutely meaningless to him. That policy refers to COPA's investigation. Has nothing to do with CPD. He can do it anytime he wants. So can the mayor. So for them calling for the release she's calling for a release of that video from a department that she runs, and she has the job of the leader in her palm. I don't understand what she's calling for. Just release it. Now, I don't know if it should be released immediately. I know there are plans now by the end of the week to show it to the family, which I think is a great move before it gets released publicly. Then we'll have some evidence to start basing our views on whether or not we think the shooting's legitimate. We're not even sure if the body cam footage is going to show us anything to really make firm decisions about whether or not the shooting was good. The reason I'm bringing this up is because there was a foot pursuit in that case, and now Lightfoot is using this case to push for a foot pursuit policy. That's fine, but in my view, that should have been done, close to 700 days ago when she took office. So it's just probably, it's April, so it's only about 6 weeks or 42 days, so 300 days. 6 weeks, about 660 days ago is when she should have called for that foot pursuit policy change. This is nothing progressive police reform advocates don't know that needs to be done. Calling for it after this, in my view, is that she's just late to the game. She has had to be dragged kicking and screaming to reforms for the police department, even though she campaigned as this big police reformer. It's sad, but I agree that this needs to be done, and this is a change long overdue. It's safer for police. It's safer for citizens, residents, if this policy is amended. It would just have been better if this had been done a year and a half ago, long before this shooting. Okay, we're going to move on to our second segment. And this is a post. I'm not even sure if I would want you people to read it, but I'm going to talk about it because I find it immensely interesting. And I think this is a great example of basically the conspiracy theories that have taken root in cities across the country and everywhere across the country, but especially in big cities, especially with police departments. Martin Priebe, who's the author of this post, he was an I think he ran the communications department, communications wing for the Fraternal Order of Police, the largest of the police unions in Chicago. And he has long been a conspiracy theory. He's published books of massive conspiracy theories. He doesn't think that the John Burge torture scandal, abuse scandal, 20 plus years running, even exists. He thinks it's all lies. Thinks it's all made up. He thinks it's strictly done out of some conspiracy between civil rights lawyers and the media to hate police. And that's why that's why John Burge was eventually fired from the department. That's why John Burge was eventually imprisoned in federal prison for perjury in a civil suit related to that, one of the abuses. Despite all of that, it's a massive conspiracy. And this has been time immemorial. He has been going for this for decades. This conspiracy theory, massive. Every media outlet in Chicago is involved. Every civil rights lawyer is involved. It's a massive, massive conspiracy. The lunacy there, to get your head around how that would have to operate. But that is like the seeds of what leads us to what happened at the Capitol, right? That's how we get there. These things have been simmering in cities for decades, in our police department, our military. This is what's been happening. And that's how you get to DC. These are the roots of it. These massive conspiracy theories. Actually, if you look at it when they were putting John Burge on trial, it was a conspiracy theory between the media, civil rights lawyers, academics, and federal prosecutors. They were all involved universally to frame police as bad and to frame Burge like it never happened, and anti-death penalty activists. We were all involved in that. This post is really about that. And so what's the actual post about? It's about whether or not the Sun-Times is stirring unrest, civil unrest, kind of on purpose as one of their goals, because they published the fact that people in communities of color, especially in the community where Adam Toledo was shot and killed, that the people in those communities, surprise, surprise, did not necessarily believe the police when they said it automatically was a justified shooting. And that reality, rather than sinking in about why there's mistrust, that mistrust is never laid at the hands of the police, right? It's never their fault. It's around a massive conspiracy, right? So this is part of the ongoing conspiracy. The Sun-Times is committed to this. Everything they publish is anti-police. Now, we are working on a project, and I can tell you we've done some analysis, and I can prove scientifically with social science research, with multiple years of media coverage throughout all of Chicago media. For a group of years, I think we're going to be able to look at 17, and we'll be able to look into 21, starting in 17. We can tell you, our baseline initial research has already shown, that ain't true. There's no conspiracy. Try to convince a police officer of it, even smart ones, it's nearly impossible. What we're going to provide the data, we're going to provide the social science research, and we're going to be able to prove it. Will we ever get Martin Priebe to think about it? Never. There's no way. There's no data to show them they know. Sounds very much like our ex-president, very much like many of his followers. Okay, here's one that just shows, here's a quote that just shows you how out of touch he is. From the Post. Like the rest of the journalists in Chicago, Sun-Times personnel seem wholly ignorant of the deep mistrust they have garnered in the public, who have grown weary of activist journalism the Sun-Times so clearly represents. Pretty good one, huh? Yep. The Sun-Times is oblivious to the distrust that is in communities about their institution. Yeah, there is definitely some trust in communities, no doubt about it, in the media, no doubt. But it's nowhere near the distrust there is in communities of color for policing. And we can go over it. The conspiracy around the shooting of Laquan McDonald, how no one turned him in that night. They got rid of their body cams. They turned their police cameras so they wouldn't see the event. None of them reported that the shooting was actually a murder. The Burger King video goes blank for the 10 minutes around the shooting, and only the 10 minutes around the shooting. Right? I mean, Austin 10. The special operations section went bust. Joseph Majanowski. I mean, you can go on and on and on and on. Right? Not to mention Burge's 20 years of reign. It's just... And the end, deep in this post, I want to mention one other thing about the post. He talks about how, this is what I don't understand, and I'm going to do a bigger show on this, which is communities don't fear the police. So do they not fear the police, or do they not fear the repercussions of the criminal justice system? Or is it that the circumstances in their communities and in their lives are so bad that they don't care if they're going to be caught? If it's the latter, if it's the last thing I just mentioned, that is a huge societal problem. That's how most normal people would think about this. But what cops say, that criminals don't fear us. Are they supposed to fear you? Is that what it is? It's all about fear. Is it fear of getting caught, or is it fear of being killed and beaten? Which one is it? Is it repercussions of the system, or is it they don't, you want them to fear that you're going to kill them or shoot them or beat them? Which is it? Because every time there's a police accountability scandal, these people like Preber nowhere to be found, or they're lying about it. The FOP spokesman at the time, Pat Camden, the night Laquan McDonald was getting shot, what did he say? He lied. He lied. And then when the media, after the video came out and the media finally said, oh God, that guy we've been sucking quotes from without ever challenging has been lying to us. They're engaged in covering that lie. They let Pat Camden lie for years at all these shootings. Years. Lied. Every shooting. Lied. That's all he did was lie. And when Pat Camden got caught, he goes, I don't know where I heard it from. It was a rumor. I don't remember who told me. I don't know. I just kind of gained things from being around in the environment. I didn't speak to anyone. What are you talking about? This is where these people just have this so flipped. Right? It's just sad. Okay. Segment 3 here. Feds probing a shooting at the Red Line. This is very interesting to me because of all the shootings and of all the problems to be probing, maybe because there's video, which we'll see of a piece of in a minute, the police are probing a shooting that occurred on February 28th, 2020, where Officer Melvina Bogard shot a 34-year-old Ariel Roman on the platform at the Red Line Grand Station. The video got released because when you see that picture, and we can go to it right here, when you see this picture, that video right here, that's clipped a little bit, but you're going to see a piece of it in a second, that video is taken by a passenger on the CTA train that Mr. Roman just got off of, and so did the officers. He crosses between cars. The officers are put on the train because there's a crime spike. So, they stop him. He resists because he has drugs on him. So he resists and resists and resists. And they tried to shoot him with tasers. They didn't take because he had a big jacket on, so it had no effect to him. And we won't see the whole video because I don't want to show the shooting. But if you see it, they eventually shoot him right on the platform. Mind-boggling shooting. Now, I'm going to show you a video that we made about a year ago, about this and the real cause. And I want to caution you. We're going to talk about, first of all, let me talk about the reason I'm curious about why this shooting specifically is being probed by the feds. I think it's because we have video. I don't think, I would like to offer the idea, and I'm ready if you got questions or comments at all, regardless of the platform you're on, drop them in the comments. I'll mention them on the show. I think we should consider separating out shootings that differ, that are caused by incompetence, which is what I think this shooting was actually caused by, or partially caused by, I should say, and shootings that are purely biased or due to hate or corruption. What am I talking about? Laquan McDonald. That to me was a plain murder. That was a plain murder. There was no reason to shoot whatsoever, and he shot him 16 times. That to me was a murder. It wasn't incompetence. It was a flat-out murder. Where this shooting, they're in a CTA train. They can't. There's two police officers, one offender. They can't seem to corral him. They've used their tasers to no effect. They're not going to have effect in big parkas. That's kind of thing they're trained on, but they use them anyways. They don't want to use their billy clubs. So what do they do instead of letting them get away? Which, by the way, you're not supposed to shoot someone running away. You're only supposed to shoot someone that is an imminent threat to your life or the life or safety of other citizens. The only imminent threat to life and safety was actually the officers. I think that was incompetence, is what caused that shooting. And incompetence is different. Should they keep their jobs? Absolutely not. Fired, gone. They should have been off the job within a matter of weeks. They should have been stripped of their duties immediately and their powers, sat on a desk, and then fired at the first possible. Let the investigation go through the day after, fire them. They should be gone. But there's a difference between incompetence and a biased, hate-filled, or corruption-driven shooting. To me, they're different. So, what I'm going to do now is play a video that we made about a year ago about our takes on what caused this. Our first delve into policy, just as we were starting the show. So I'll be back with you after the video, and we'll talk a little more about this and some of the other segments we have going. One, the shooting was obviously very bad. First shot, partner was in the line of fire. Second shot, as the offender, who is not an imminent physical threat to anyone, is fleeing up the escalator. She shoots up an escalator at an L station. Mind-bogglingly bad. 2, the interaction simply should have never occurred. If you're there to stop violent crime, you're not going after people walking between cars. We'll get to the reason why I think they did this. 3, he didn't really get shot for jumping cars or walking between the cars. The way the use of force guidelines operate, when that officer interacts with you, you put up resistance. The use of force guidelines then go up about what they can do legally to stop that resistance. The investigation is complete, so we don't know what happened between them walking between the offender walking between the cars and the eventual shooting. We don't know exactly what happened. We got to wait for the investigation to be completed. But it's not exactly that. What the shooting was caused by resisting arrest. That's why he was shot. Now, the shooting should have never happened, but that's exactly why it did. It's not exactly 100% correct to say he got shot for jumping between cars. He didn't walk between cars and they shot him right away. There's a gap there. We have to find out what happened in that gap. It's very important. The bottom line is the interaction should have never happened. Point 4, is the training in the Chicago Police Department really this bad? These officers were 2 years out of the academy. These aren't officers that have been on the street 15 years, riding desk, and haven't had the follow-up training, which we know has been a problem in the CPD. These people have been on the street 2 years, and this is what happens. This is clearly a sign that the CPD's training is broken and remains broken, or at least remains broken until 2017 or 18. If they have made changes in between, we need to make sure they did, or whether they did or didn't, because if they didn't, that's a major problem. 5, what was the reason behind this interaction in the first place? We have to wait for the investigation to be complete, but my theory right now, and what I've heard from officers and officials in the department and experts, is this was about generating activity. So I've seen in depositions it called humper activity. This is about police officers having to go back at the end of their day and report their activity. They have to show that they did something, right, that they were actually policing. And this is one of the ways you do it, writing an ANOV. It's ridiculous, an administrative notice of violation, which is the ticket that the offender would have gotten or should have gotten for walking between the cars. We could argue about whether the interaction should have happened. In my view, it shouldn't have happened. The reason it did is not because it's partly because of bad training. It's part of a lot of things. But the bottom line, I think, is what's going to come out is this was about generating activity. When you're there to prevent the violent crime spike, so-called on the CTA, you don't waste time writing ANOVs for walking between cars. It's just ridiculous. And this is the problem. We need to limit where we can, as best as we can, the amount of interaction between the police department and citizens. The officers are armed. If resistance comes at the officers, they have weapons. This is always a possible outcome. And that's why small things like ANOVs and walking between cars, if you're not endangering anyone, the police should leave. They shouldn't be interacting with that. This is just a great symbol, this incident, of what is the possibility of every interaction between the police and citizens and residents of Chicago. This should have never happened. Thank you for supporting the Chicago Justice Project. You can follow us on Twitter and Facebook. You can also go to our YouTube channel. Okay, so as you see, this is about systems change. Humper activity, those cops had to go back and show that they did something for the day. That is not, I mean, I also think it was partially caused by incompetence, right? But it's systems change. You have to change how you calculate things, how you determine that the police are doing something, the officers themselves. And it's hard in these situations to do that, but the police need to do that. Love him or hate him, Andrew Yang, who ran for the presidential nomination and Democratic ticket in the last election, he's right in that you work towards what you measure. And for better or worse, they measure activity through this Humper activity. How many ANOVs do you write? How many arrests did you get? What are the quality of the arrests? That, blah, 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 blah. How many drugs did you get? Did you turn in a gun? Right? I mean, you can see that all the time on the news. So that's what this is about. Now, I'm going to reiterate something if I mentioned it already. If not, I want to talk about it quickly. It is unfair and not legitimate to say he got shot because he walked between the cars. People have to understand, if you resist an initial inquiry from the police, they will then respond to the resistance they get. And the more you resist, and the more physical you get with that resistance, the level of force they are allowed to use and are trained to use goes up. It's a continuum. The more resistance you put in, the more use of force they will bring to overcome that resistance. We can argue that that should be changed. And with de-escalation training and everything, that is being somewhat addressed. It needs to be addressed more. But it's not exactly fair, like they saw him walking between the doors and they shot him for it because it was such a serious offense. That's not what happened. Should the shooting have happened? Absolutely not. Should they have really stopped him? As I said in the video, absolutely not. It should have never happened. They should be fired. But the really way to stop that, to make sure in the next month, next year, that you put 2 officers on the train again and that someone doesn't get shot after walking between cars and then putting up resistance when they inquire to write them a ticket, is by not having them inquire and write a ticket about something so stupid as that. This is the problem with why we need to find alternative responses to policing. I mean, to crimes, or to stuff that doesn't need a guy or a woman with a gun to show up. Quality of life issues. As much as we can get people with guns stopping to show up to things that they don't need to show up for, the better we're all going to be, including the cops. It's better for everyone. Now, get that past the Martin Preebs of the world, it is nearly impossible. As you can tell from all these years and where we are in Chicago, the CPD is not good at systems change, and the officers, unfortunately, a lot of times don't have the mentality to do it. Okay, we are going to take a break really quickly, and we will be back in 1 minute with you. Thank you so much for being here.
Join a group of engaged and committed individuals advocating for transparency and accountability in the local justice system around the country. Get engaged through crowdsourced research projects, digital activism, public policy advocacy, or become a social media ambassador. Our criminal justice system will not reform itself. Communities must demand it. Transparency can be the fuel for justice our local communities need to combat the weaponizing of data by our justice system. Transformation of our justice system cannot occur until we know exactly what they are doing and who they are doing it to. Get involved today. CJP Nation.
All right, we are back, and we're going to start with our next segment. This is a op-ed of sorts written by Jens Ludwig, or Dr. Jens Ludwig, from the University of Chicago Crime Lab, which you'll remember just a couple of weeks ago we had a couple of representatives of the Crime Lab talking about the officer support system, which I think actually is a good thing. But Mr. Ludwig here, who I have issues with from a previous report he wrote under ROM talking about the need for mandatory minimums for gun crimes, even though all the social science dating back to the mid-70s, except one article that I think was eventually retracted a few years after it was written, proved that mandatory minimums do not work. So I have issues with who paid the Crime Lab or Ludwig himself to author that original article. I will tell you, I have issues with him. I was on faculty as a visiting professor at the University of St. Francis out in Joliet, Illinois, during this time period a few years ago when Ron was in. And I tried to have Ludwig come out. We were going to have a big event at the university and bring Dr. Ludwig out, someone from the Black Caucus in the Illinois General Assembly, and then someone from at least the Joliet Police Department, if not also the Will County State's Attorney's Office. And Ludwig told me on the phone that because he got such criticism from so many academics about just the ludicrous study, quote unquote, a loosely based study, agenda, propaganda item written for the mayor's office, more or less, because Ron was pushing mandatory minimums. And he said to me flat out, I don't talk about that paper in public anymore. I mean, it was shocking. You're an academic. You published it, and if you're not going to retract it, then you need to defend it, and you need to show up. Ever since that phone call, I've just written him off. And this is another reason why you need to write off Mr. Ludwig. It doesn't mean he hasn't done any good work. It just means that some of his work is to such a low quality that you just can't take him seriously. And unfortunately, he gets to write these huge op-eds in the Tribune. So what is he talking about? Data points. This is the title. Illegal guns carrying in Chicago spiked in 2020, and deadly violence followed. Now, how in the world could he tell definitively in a social science, empirical, methodologically sound manner that gun possession went up in Chicago? Well, his kind of backwards way of doing it is saying, well, the police during 2020, basically starting in the pandemic in March or early April, their stops, stop and frisk, their street stops in Chicago, turned up a much greater percentage of people carrying guns than would or have in the past years. Okay, now that sounds, okay, you're like, oh, okay, that makes sense, except one thing, ladies and gentlemen. It's kind of big, just a little big, kind of big. It's a pandemic. So, the only people out walking around, not entirely, but certainly significant numbers of people in communities all over Chicago, including underserved communities, where unfortunately people feel a need at times to carry weapons, are staying home, especially if they can work from home. They're not going out. And if they are working jobs where they have to go out, one would think there was a fair amount, a fair percentage of those people that were doing what most people were if they had to work, which was going home and staying home after it. So he doesn't account for this in this op-ed, but the likely, what we're talking about here most likely, and he can't control for it and he can't rule it out, so I completely am aghast by the analysis, is that the reality is the people on the streets to be available to be stopped and frisked were people participating in illicit markets, were involved in gang activity, were involved in drug dealing or some other illicit activities. They were out, not even in a higher percentage. They may have been out the same amount they would have before, but the number of people, the percentage of people out greatly shot up. The percentage of people in the illicit markets made up a greater percentage of the people out by probably a factor of 5 or 10 or 50, because most people were staying in for most of the pandemic, unless they had to go out to work. They were forced to it, and believe me, in these communities, a lot of people are hourly wages, hourly workers, and can't stay home, so I get that. But it wasn't like people in these communities were just out and about in their community and normal activity. It's ludicrous to believe that. So of course the cops are going to be finding a higher percentage of people with guns in their stops, because a lot of the people without guns are staying home. They're not participating in those markets. It's something he doesn't control for. It's something he can't control for. It's kind of a manufactured backwards way of doing the analysis. I don't think it has any credibility, but this is this is one of the problems with the media, is that they don't have the what's the word for it? They don't really have the skill set to know when these analyses are just bad. I mean, it looks good. He's got good credentials at the University of Chicago. He's published. I mean, why not believe him? I just don't. I think this is reverse engineered to fit a political perspective. He does talk about somewhat of the social factors involved in why people in these communities sometimes have to carry guns. That's a new change that wasn't involved in his mandatory minimums piece that got refuted by many academics. Northwestern, I think it was the Bloom Little Clinic, it may have been the MacArthur Justice Center, one of them issued a rebuttal to his report signed by many academics, many very well published, very good researchers, refuted that original paper that I was talking about. So he gets this kind of play and space on the Tribune's website, probably appeared in the paper, but I just don't buy it. I don't think it has credibility at any level, and I find it annoying. It's at best, rudimentary discussion. Not much of social science is going to have any credibility trying to look at what happened during 2020. And Ludwig, to his credit, talks about how January, February, and March, the percentage of people, January, February, March of 2020, people, the rate at which people were carrying guns or found to be carrying guns in the stop and frisk program in Chicago, were the same as they were the year before, right on the numbers you would expect. And then in April, things changed. Shocking. There's no way to account for the massive, unbelievable disruption in life the pandemic was. And trying to compare those numbers with numbers from years past is ludicrous. I would say I think there was definitely an uptick in violence throughout all of the pandemic, and it continues, and we'll talk about that in a minute, but there's no doubt that uptick probably had some role in the reasons why people involved in the illicit markets felt the need to carry guns. So they may have been carrying more guns because of all the violence in 20. That's a possibility, but how you get to that, I have no idea. I think you're not going to be able to do it through the data the CPD collects. He uses CPD data. There's no way to get at that with CPD data. If he wanted to go sit and talk to people in Cook County Jail, or talk to people that were arrested with guns, or go on the corners and engage with the people there and talk to them. It's a possibility of getting at it through some kind of qualitative research, but not through the numbers that Ludwig is trying to do. That's certain. Okay, so for our next segment, this is probably one of the worst pieces you're going to see published in Chicago all year on crime and violence. This may be one of the worst, if not the worst, you're going to see. This is pretty much zero sourced, if there is such a thing. This either came to Frank Main, who wrote it, as a tip from the media department. They sent him a press release. They may have sent him the whole damn article. It is awful. So, the gang, supposedly, gang leaders instructed their members in the area around Adam Toledo's death, the gang that's in that area, supposedly. Now, is it a Latino gang? Is it still intact? How many members do they have? Or is it divided up into cliques, which has been a thing with a lot of African American gangs? The centralized gang leadership isn't a thing, but let's not get to that just yet. So Frank Main gets a tip that gang intelligence has told the department and the officers in that area to be careful because the leadership of the gang told their members to shoot, or instructed them, let me use their words, to shoot at police vehicles, I think unmarked vehicles, because of the Adam Toledo shooting. Now, it might be true. It might be. There's not a single source in this story. Zero. You didn't get that. Zero. None. It may be a story, but Frank Main either took a press release or got a call from a cop and said, you got to write about this, and that's what he did. There's zero sources in this story. It's obscene. It's a couple hundred words, and it's got a great headline. That probably is so SEO'd. I mean, that if you're talking about clickbait, this is the epitome of clickbait. Now tell me how a zero source story like this makes the Sun-Times website, amidst Frank Main and all the other press in the Sun-Times being part of some left cabal with the civil rights lawyers and the reform advocates and the judges and the prosecutors and the federal prosecutors. They're all in it together. Tell me how that story gets in the paper if Frank Main's part of some left-wing cabal that hates the police. It's a joke. This thing should have never been printed. It doesn't mean the general idea isn't worthy of being researched more thoroughly and actually producing a story. Maybe hard to do under COVID, but maybe Frank Main should go to that community and start talking to people, knocking on doors, doing, what's that called again? Journalism. This is not journalism. My bet, if you strip the name off of it and strip the names of the departments and just made it up and turn this into any journalism school, senior level class journalism school, they would give this article an F. They wouldn't accept it. I doubt this would make the Northwestern papers, the Loyola newspaper. This wouldn't make it. This is a piece of crap. It's a quick, easy story with a great headline that's SEO'd and clickbait to the max. And now the cops are yelling, look, they're going to shoot us, David Brown saying they're going to shoot us. Maybe true. Frank Main did no work to prove it, that this is true. How do we know it's true? How do we know this wasn't one idiot person talking to another idiot person and that no order or instructions were actually given? How do we know? We don't. And Frank doesn't. It's a piece of crap. It should have never been printed. So when you hear about like conspiracy theories with left-wing media outlets and judges and lawyers and federal prosecutors and civil rights lawyers and reform advocates. Remember, pieces of crap like this get published all the time. And Frank Main, remember, ladies and gentlemen, he's won a Pulitzer Prize. He's Pulitzer Prize winning journalist Frank Main. Didn't that deserve a Pulitzer Prize? Oh my God. I don't know what the opposite is, but what is ever the opposite of a Pulitzer Prize is what Frank Main deserved for that article. Okay. Last segment of the night. And we're going to get back to a little bit of what I talked about a couple segments ago. And the journalists can't help themselves doing this. These are articles that are written every year comparing crime and violence to the month last year or the weekend last year, or, even though things are same, they can't help but do this over and over. It's just like they have this quiver of articles that they have to write every year. And when they're bored or they don't have time to think of something, they pull one of these things out. Here we go. This is Jeremy Gorner, Chicago Tribune. Let me give you an image here. So the headline reads, Chicago sees another spike in shootings, with most killings in the first 3 months of the year since 2017. Okay. Wow, that sounds bad. Now, once again, ladies and gentlemen, I've been harping on this all pandemic, and I'm going to continue to harp on it. You cannot compare crime and violence levels that are going on during the pandemic to pre-pandemic years. It is impossible. This is bullshit. This is bullshit of the highest order. This is another article that should not have been published. Period. They shouldn't have done it. Yes, shootings are up. It's unbelievable. Do you know that the pandemic caused, not only worldwide, but let's just talk in Chicago, epic, maybe unprecedented since the Depression, maybe even worse than the Depression because of the health issues, unprecedented economic, housing, and health insecurity. How in the hell are you going to compare crime and violence under those issues, under those circumstances, to crime and violence in the first 3 months of 2020 when there was none of that? How do you compare those two and say that's an equal comparison? Oh, here it is. You don't do it. But these journalists can't help themselves. They can't get out of the box they're in. The box, they have a quiver on their back, they stay within the box, and they just got to pull these quivers out, pull the stories out of their quiver. What can I repeat to get something done? Because I don't feel like really doing my job, so here it is. This is what you get. Tribune, Jeremy Gorner. Unbelievable. Do you believe 3 months in the midst of a worldwide pandemic, there's more violence than there was when there was no pandemic? It's unbelievable. It is truly unbelievable. They can't stop themselves. This is a rinse-repeat issue, right? This is an article he's written at least every year, if not 5 times a year, for every year he's been on writing about policing justice issues in Chicago. It's just, and he's going to continue. If he's there for 10 more years, we're going to see at least 10 more of these, if not 20 more of these, 50 more of these. They love them. People click the hell out of them. This one is the absolute worst. It is absolutely meaningless. It is completely full of shit. Should never have been published. But they can't help themselves. It gets gobbled up. The Tribune's writing to people in the suburbs and in the rural areas, and people gobble up that stuff like nobody's business. Right? Violence cities, oh my God, they're so bad. Nothing new. The Tribune's going to keep doing it. Gorner, Maine, at the Sun-Times. This stuff is going to keep coming out. And I'm going to keep ripping the hell out of it. Okay. Thank you so much, everyone, for being here. I really appreciate it. We will be back on Wednesday at 5:30 p.m. Central and Friday at 5:30 p.m. Central, as we're Monday, Wednesday, Friday. Just a quick reminder, if you're interested in sponsoring the show, drop us a line at info@chicagojustice.org and we'll hook you up. We can also set up a customized sponsorship plan if you're interested in it or your company's interested in it. We're all for corporate sponsorships. And Wednesday night, 7:30 p.m. Central Time, or 7 p.m. Central Time, sorry. We have our CJP Nation meetings. Get involved with Crowdsource Research Project, political advocacy, social media ambassador, fundraising for us. Some of them have chosen to do fundraising for us. Get involved. We have 150 people from not only around Chicago and the suburbs, but from around the nation, and actually a couple people from outside America helping us push our transparency and accountability agenda across the country. We've expanded into DC, the District of Columbia, where I'm coming from, and we're expanding to Maryland soon, and the summer around the country. So thank you so much. If you're interested, info@chicagojustice.org, and we'll get back to you. Thanks again, and I will see you on Wednesday.